Have you ever had your heart completely shattered by someone you trusted, only to discover years later that they actually gave you the greatest gift of your life? Well, hello there, my dear friends. I'm Joe, and at 65, I've collected more stories than I have gray hairs, and that's saying something. Today, I want to share with you one of the most painful experiences of my professional life. One that nearly broke me at the time, but ultimately became the foundation for everything good that followed. And it's about the promotion I didn't get, the betrayal that cut deep, and how sometimes what feels like the end of the world is actually just the beginning of your real story. So settle in with something warm to drink. Maybe find that comfortable spot where the light hits just right. And let me take you back to a time when I thought I knew exactly where my life was headed. Spoiler alert, I had no idea what was coming. And thank God for that, though. You know, if you're finding comfort in stories like these, if they feel like visits from an old friend who understands the weight of years and the wisdom they bring, you might want to stick around for more. We're building something special here together. One memory at a time, one lesson earned through living. But let me start at the beginning, because every good story deserves its proper foundation. So picture this. It's 1991, and I'm sitting in my gray Toyota Camry in the parking lot of Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm in downtown Richmond, Virginia. My hands are shaking, not from the cold February morning, but from excitement. Pure, electric anticipation coursing through my veins like I haven't felt since my wedding day. Day was the day. Oh. After 5 years of grinding it out in that beige-walled office, after countless late nights and weekend work sessions, after missing more family dinners than I care to count, today was the day Harold Morrison was going to announce the new senior partner. And everyone knew it was going to be me. I sat there for a moment, engine off, watching my breath fog the windshield, and allowed myself to dream. When I pictured Margaret's face when I told her the news, I imagined calling my dad, hearing the pride in his voice when I said those magical words, senior partner. I thought about the corner office with the window that actually opened, the parking spot with my name on it, the salary that would finally let us stop counting pennies and start planning that trip to Ireland Margaret had been circling in travel magazines for years. That's how long I'd been Harold's right-hand man. 5 years of arriving first, leaving last, saying yes to every project, every impossible deadline, every client who thought their tax returns were more important than my son's baseball games or my daughter's school plays. But it was all going to be worth it. And at least, that's what I told myself as I straightened my lucky tie, the blue one with the tiny anchors that Margaret had given me for our anniversary, and walked through those glass doors one more time as associate partner Joe McKenna. The next time I walked through them, I'd be senior partner McKenna. Or so I thought. You ever notice how the universe has a sense of humor? How it lets you climb right to the edge of your dreams before showing you that maybe, just maybe, you've been looking in the wrong direction all along? I should have seen the signs. Looking back now, they were scattered throughout that morning like breadcrumbs leading to a truth I wasn't ready to face. The first sign was Linda at the reception desk. Linda had been there since the Carter administration, and she knew everything that happened in that building before it happened. Usually, she'd greet me with her morning gossip and a fresh cup of coffee that was somehow always the perfect temperature. But that morning, she barely looked up from her computer. "Morning, Linda," I said, trying to sound casual despite the drumbeat of excitement in my chest. "Morning," she replied, her voice flat as day-old soda. No smile, no coffee, no Harold wants to see you in his office, with that knowing wink she'd give when good news was coming. The second sign was the conference room. As I passed by on my way to my cubicle, soon to be former cubicle, I reminded myself, I noticed Harold inside with someone I didn't recognize. A younger man in an expensive suit, talking animatedly while Harold nodded and smiled in a way I'd only seen him do with potential clients or his golf buddies. But I brushed it off. Dumb. New client, probably with diet. Harold loved his power meetings, especially when there was money involved, and the third sign should have knocked me flat on my back. But I was so drunk on anticipation that I missed it entirely. Because Chen, the other associate partner, was cleaning out his desk. Now, Marcus was good, real good. Harvard MBA, sharp as a tack, could make numbers dance and sing in ways that made clients weep with joy. We'd been friendly competitors for years, both of us knowing that only one of us would make senior partner when old Mr. Jeffries finally retired to his boat in Florida. But Marcus was methodical, organized, the type who never left so much as a paperclip out of place. So seeing him packing his personal items into a cardboard box at 8:30 in the morning was unusual. Spring cleaning. Marcus? I asked, trying to keep things light. He looked up at me with something I couldn't quite read in his eyes. Pity, resignation, fear. Something like that, he said quietly, then went back to wrapping his coffee mug in tissue paper like it was made of spun glass. That I should have pressed him, should have asked more questions, should have sat down and really looked at what was happening around me. But I didn't, because I was so certain, so absolutely, completely, bone-deep certain that this was my day. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in Harold's office. All the associates had been summoned, which was standard procedure for major announcements. And I spent the hour between 9 and 10 straightening my desk, rehearsing my acceptance speech in my head, and checking my reflection in my computer screen approximately 17 times. Margaret had helped me pick out the shirt that morning. Whoopee blue, crisp white collar, not a wrinkle in sight. She'd kissed me goodbye and whispered, "Knock 'em dead, senior partner, McKenna." And I'd walked out of our little colonial house feeling like I could conquer the world. At 9:58, I knocked on Harold's door. "Menon," came his gravelly voice, the same voice that had hired me 5 years earlier. The same voice that had promised me this day would come if I just worked hard enough and kept my nose clean. I opened the door and stepped inside, ready for my moment. And that's when my world fell apart. Harold was there, yes, sitting behind his massive oak desk like always, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, his silver hair perfectly combed despite the fact that it was a Tuesday and no clients were scheduled. But he wasn't alone. Sitting in the chair I'd sat in countless times over the years, the chair where we'd discussed strategies and budgets and dreams, was the young man I'd seen earlier, up close. He looked even younger than I'd thought. Mid-30s, maybe. Expensive suit, manicured nails. The kind of confident smile that comes from never having to worry about money or failure or whether your kids could afford college. "Joey," Harold said, standing up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'd like you to meet David Richardson." "David, this is Joe McKenna, one of our finest associate partners." David stood and extended a hand that was softer than a baby's cheek and probably worth more than my annual salary based on the watch wrapped around his wrist. "Joe," he said, voice smooth as aged whiskey, "Harold's told me so much about you. You've built quite a reputation here." I shook his hand, confusion starting to creep in around the edges of my excitement like fog rolling in from the sea. "Nice to meet you. David, are you a new client?" That's when Harold cleared his throat in that particular way he did when he was about to deliver news that nobody wanted to hear. "Actually, Joe, why don't you have a seat? The others should be here any moment, and then we can get started." The others filed in by Wayne, looking like he was attending his own funeral. Susan from tax prep, nervous as a cat in a thunderstorm. Bill from auditing, who couldn't seem to look me in the eye. 2 junior associates whose names I suddenly couldn't remember, despite working with them for months. We all took our seats in the semicircle of chairs Harold had arranged in front of his desk, like students waiting for the principal to announce test scores. Harold remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, looking out the window at the city skyline below. The silence stretched like taffy, sweet at first but quickly becoming uncomfortable. "Julian," he turned back to us. "As you all know," he began, "Richard Jefferies announced his retirement last month, and after 32 years with this firm, he's earned his rest." Us all around. We all knew this. This was the setup for my big moment. This leaves us with a significant decision to make regarding the future leadership of Morrison & Associates. So I've given this considerable thought, consulted with the board, and we've come to a unanimous decision. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. This was it. This was the moment I'd been working toward for 5 years. I could almost taste the champagne. I'm pleased to announce that our new senior partner will be David Richardson. The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Harold had said Joe McKenna, and my brain had somehow scrambled the syllables. But then David was standing, accepting congratulations. And Harold was talking about his fresh perspective and innovative approaches and family connections to several major clients. Family connections. The room was spinning. I felt like I was watching the scene from underwater, everything muffled and distorted. Someone was talking, Harold, maybe, about David's impressive credentials and his vision for the firm's future, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat and the faint ringing in my ears that suggested I might be having some kind of breakdown. 5 years of my life poured into this place like water into sand. 5 years of saying yes when I wanted to say no, of choosing work over family, of believing that loyalty and hard work and showing up every single day would be enough. And they gave it to a stranger, a kid with soft hands and a famous last name who probably learned about accounting from his trust fund manager. I must have made some kind of sound, maybe, or a strangled laugh because suddenly everyone was looking at me. David was extending his hand again, saying something about looking forward to working with such an experienced team. And I was supposed to smile and congratulate him and pretend that my entire world hadn't just crumbled into dust. And somehow I managed to shake his hand. Yes, somehow I mumbled something that might have passed for congratulations. Somehow I sat through the rest of the meeting while Harold outlined the exciting new direction the firm was heading under David's leadership. But it might be, I was screaming. When the meeting finally ended, I walked back to my cubicle like a man in a trance. My desk looked exactly the same pictures of Margaret and the kids, same stack of files, same coffee-stained calendar with important dates circled in red. But somehow, everything felt different, smaller, meaningless. I sat down in my chair and stared at my computer screen, not really seeing anything. Around me, the office hummed with its usual Tuesday morning energy. Phones ringing. Keyboards clicking, the coffee maker gurgling to life in the break room. But all I could think about was how I was going to tell Margaret. How do you look at the woman you love? The woman who supported every decision, every sacrifice, every late night and missed dinner, and tell her that it was all for nothing? How do you explain that the promotion you've been talking about for months, the one that was supposed to change everything, just went to someone else? Someone who probably couldn't balance a checkbook without help? I picked up the phone 3 times to call her, and 3 times I put it back down. And what would I say? "Hi, honey. Remember that promotion I was so sure about? Well, funny story." The rest of that day passed in a blur of forced normalcy. I answered emails. I reviewed reports. I attended a meeting about quarterly projections, and I did all the things I'd been doing for 5 years. But it felt like playing a part in a movie I no longer wanted to be in. Around 3 p.m., Marcus appeared at my cubicle carrying his cardboard box. "I'm heading out," he said simply. "Where are you going?" I asked, though I think I already knew. Richardson offered me a position at his father's firm in DC. Better money, better opportunities. He paused, Like studying my face, come on. He offered you one too, didn't he, Wesley? I nodded. During the meeting, David had mentioned something about exciting opportunities for experienced professionals and how he'd be honored to have someone of my caliber on his team. I'd been too shocked to process it fully at the time, but now it hit me like a slap. They didn't just steal my promotion. They expected me to be grateful for the consolation prize. What did you tell him? Marcus asked. I told him I'd think about it. Marcus nodded slowly. You know what this means, don't you? They're cleaning house. Everyone who was here before Richardson, everyone who might question his methods or challenge his authority, we're all expendable now. He adjusted his grip on the box, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. 5 years. Joe, 5 years, and they tossed us aside like yesterday's newspaper. He started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, you deserve that promotion. Everyone knows it. But deserving something and getting it, well, that's not always the same thing, and is it? After he left, I sat alone with that truth settling over me like a heavy blanket. Deserving something and getting it, not always the same thing. The injustice of it burned in my chest like acid. And I thought about all the weekends I'd spent in this office while my kids were at soccer games and dance recitals. And I thought about the vacation we'd postponed 3 times because of critical deadlines. I thought about the promises Harold had made, the handshakes, the assurances that my dedication wouldn't go unnoticed. And I thought about David Richardson, with his perfect hair and his perfect smile and his perfectly connected family, walking into my life and taking everything I'd worked for without even breaking a sweat. The worst part? He seemed like a decent enough kid, polite, enthusiastic, probably not even aware that he'd just destroyed someone's life simply by existing. On that night, I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to go inside. Through the kitchen window, I could see Margaret moving around, probably starting dinner. The warm light made everything look cozy and inviting, like a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting. Home and family, the things that were supposed to matter most, but all I felt was failure. I'd failed to provide for my family the way I'd promised. Failed to achieve the success I'd been so certain was within reach. Failed to read the signs that were probably there all along, warning me that loyalty meant nothing in the face of family connections and politics. But I'd failed. When I finally walked through the front door, Margaret was at the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. Yeah, she turned with a smile that could have powered the entire house. Well, she said, eyes bright with anticipation. How does it feel to be married to a senior partner? And that's when I broke. What dramatically? Not with shouting or anger or any of the emotions I'd been carrying around all day. It got crumpled, like a piece of paper being slowly crushed in someone's fist. Margaret dropped her wooden spoon and rushed to my side, her arms wrapping around me before I even realized I was falling apart. They gave it to someone else, I whispered into her shoulder. Viewers. And they gave it to someone else. She held me while I cried. Actually cried, for the first time since my father's funeral. Tears for all the sacrifices that meant nothing. Tears for the dreams that had just died, and tears for the man I thought I was, who turned out to be just another disposable employee in a suit. Tell me everything, she said softly, guiding me to the kitchen table. So I did. I told her about David Richardson and his soft hands and his family connections. I told her about Marcus leaving and Harold's speech about fresh perspectives. I told her about the job offer that felt more like an insult than an opportunity. Margaret listened without interrupting, her hand covering mine on the table. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? She asked finally. I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know. But even as I said it, something was stirring in the back of my mind. Something small and angry and maybe a little bit dangerous. The seed of an idea that would change everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Margaret's steady breathing beside me, and tried to figure out what came next. The smart thing would be to take David's offer and swallow my pride, accept the consolation prize, and hope for better luck in a different office. Well, it was safer, predictable. The kind of decision a responsible father and husband should make. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harold's face during that meeting. The careful way he'd avoided looking directly at me, the slight smile when he mentioned David's family connections, the dismissive wave when someone asked about considering internal candidates. They'd never seriously considered me at all. I'd been a placeholder, a reliable workhorse who could keep things running while they searched for their real choice. Someone who could be counted on to work late and ask for little and never rock the boat. And someone safe, someone forgettable. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just at Harold or David or the unfairness of office politics, but at myself for believing their failures, for thinking that hard work alone would be enough, for being so naive about how the world watched them on. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the table where Margaret and I had eaten thousands of meals, paid hundreds of bills, made countless plans for a future that now seemed uncertain. That's when I noticed the stack of mail Margaret had left for me to sort through. She is on a credit card offer, a catalog for golf equipment I couldn't afford, and buried underneath it all, a letter from my old college roommate, Tim Hennessy. I hadn't heard from him in almost 2 years, but we'd kept in loose touch through Christmas cards and the occasional phone call. Last I'd heard, he was running his own consulting business somewhere in North Carolina. I opened the letter more out of curiosity than anything else. Hope this finds you well. I know it's been too long since we last talked, but I wanted to reach out because I'm expanding the business and looking for a partner. Someone with your background in accounting and client relations. I remember how you used to talk about wanting to work for yourself someday. Any chance that's still a dream? Give me a call if you're interested. I think we could build something really special together. Your friend, Tim P. Remember that business plan you wrote for our entrepreneurship class? Professor Mitchell said it was the best he'd ever seen. Maybe it's time to dust it off. I read the letter 3 times, my heart doing something strange in my chest. The business plan, I'd completely forgotten about it. It was our senior year, and we'd been required to write a detailed plan for a fictional company. While most students wrote about restaurants or retail stores, I'd outlined something different, a boutique accounting firm that specialized in helping small businesses navigate the complex world of taxes, payroll, and financial planning. I'd called it McKenna and Associates, a name that had made Margaret laugh when I'd showed her the paper. Associates? She'd teased. You're the only one, I said. For now, so I'd replied with the confidence of a 22-year-old who thought he could conquer the world. But someday, someday, Mama, I sat there in my kitchen at 3 a.m. holding Tim's letter and remembering that young man who dreamed of building something of his own. When had I stopped dreaming? When had I settled for being someone else's employee, waiting for them to decide my worth? The answer was obvious. I'd stopped dreaming the day I walked into Morrison & Associates and let someone else's vision become my own. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to remember who I used to be. I spent the rest of that sleepless night in my home office, a converted bedroom that served as my sanctuary, and somewhere in the filing cabinet, buried under tax returns and insurance policies, was a manila folder labeled college papers. I found the business plan at the bottom of the stack, yellowed with age and marked with Professor Mitchell's encouraging comments in red ink. As I read through it, I could almost hear my younger self's voice, confident, ambitious, full of ideas about how to do things better than everyone else. The plan was good, surprisingly good. Detailed financial projections, market analysis, competitive positioning, all the things I'd learned in theory and had been applying in practice for 5 years at Morrison & Associates. But more than that, it was mine, my vision, my dream. By the time Margaret came downstairs for her morning coffee, I had made a decision. I'm not taking the job, I told her. She paused in the doorway, studying my face. Okay. What are you going to do instead? I handed her Tim's letter and my old business plan. I'm going to remember who I used to be, I said, before I let someone else tell me what I was worth. Margaret read both documents carefully, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she set them down on the table and looked at me with eyes that had seen me through 20 years of marriage. 3 moves, 2 kids, and countless dreams both realized and abandoned. It's risky, she said finally. I know, Mo. We have a mortgage, car payments. The kids will be starting college soon. I know, so you'll be competing against firms like Morrison and Associates, places with established clients and deep pockets. I know. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her weighing all the practical concerns, all the reasons this was a terrible idea. And then she smiled. When do we start? That single word changed everything. Not just because it meant I had her support, but because it reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, that whatever came next, we'd face it together, the way we always had. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. Then I called Tim. I was wondering if I'd hear from you, he said when I told him about Harold's meeting and David Richardson and the choice I'd made. Are you sure about this? Joe, starting over at our age, it's not exactly the conventional path. Our age was. We were both in our early 40s then. Old enough to know better, but young enough to still take risks. Old enough to have something to lose, but young enough to believe we could build it back if we failed. I'm sure, I said. Or at least, I'm sure I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. We talked for 2 hours about possibilities and logistics and dreams. Tim's business was solid but small, mostly individual tax preparation and basic bookkeeping for local shops. He'd been wanting to expand into business consulting and financial planning, but lacked the expertise and credentials. And I had both. By the end of the conversation, we had the framework for a partnership. I would bring my CPA license, my experience with corporate clients, and my knowledge of complex tax situations. And he would bring his existing client base, his local connections, and 5 years of entrepreneurial experience. Together, we might just build something neither of us could manage alone. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of decisions and paperwork and late-night planning sessions. Gave my notice at Morrison and Associates, which Harold accepted with a shrug and a comment about how he understood my desire to pursue other opportunities. No mention of the 5 years I'd given them. No acknowledgement of the projects I'd led or the clients I'd saved, and just a handshake and a reminder to return my key card. David Richardson, to his credit, seemed genuinely disappointed that I was leaving. He offered to increase the salary for his position, to give me more flexibility, to consider me for future promotions, but I was done being considered. I'm waiting for someone else to decide my value. I appreciate the offer, I told him, but I'm going to try something different. Your own firm? He asked, and I was surprised to hear something like respect in his voice. Something like that. He nodded slowly. Well, if it doesn't work out, the door's always open here. I thanked him, but we both knew I wouldn't be coming back. The hardest part wasn't leaving Morrison and Associates, and it wasn't even the fear of starting over, or the uncertainty of self-employment. The hardest part was facing the mirror every morning and trying to recognize the man looking back at me. For 20 years, I defined myself by my position at the firm. I was Joe McKenna, associate partner. Joe McKenna, Harold's right-hand man. Joe McKenna, the guy who always got things done. Now I was just, no corner office, no business cards with impressive logos, just a man with a dream and a manila folder full of faded college papers. It was terrifying and exhilarating. First year of McKenna and Associates, later renamed McKenna Hennessy Financial Services, was the hardest year of my professional life. Tim and I rented a small office above a bakery in downtown Richmond. 2-room, a shared bathroom, and a view of the alley where the delivery trucks made their morning rounds. It wasn't much, but it was ours. All in, we had exactly 7 clients to start with, Tim's existing customers who were willing to trust their accountant's new partner. 7 small businesses with simple needs and modest budgets. It wasn't the corporate clients I'd been used to, with their complex structures and million-dollar transactions. These were people like us, dreamers who'd taken risks, families who'd put everything on the line to build something of their own, who ran a small restaurant and needed help organizing her receipts into something the IRS would accept. Well, Barston, no relation to Harold, who owned a landscaping business and couldn't figure out why he was always broke despite being busier than ever. The Ramirez family, who'd opened a small grocery store and were drowning in regulations and tax requirements they didn't understand. Well, they weren't glamorous accounts. They didn't generate the kind of fees that would make the trade magazines, but they were real. They mattered, and they needed what we could offer. More importantly, they appreciated it. When I helped Mrs. Chen organize her bookkeeping system and showed her how to track her expenses properly, she cried, actually cried, right there in our little office above the bakery. For 3 years, she said, I've been afraid of making a mistake, afraid of the government, afraid of the auditors, afraid I would lose everything because I didn't understand the rules. You're not going to lose anything, I told her. We're going to make sure of that. And we did. Just he went home, but for all of them, PM. It was a different kind of success than what I'd known at Morrison & Associates. Instead of impressive profit margins and quarterly growth reports, success was measured in relieved smiles and grateful handshakes, in small business owners who could finally sleep at night because someone was watching their backs. Word spread. Miss Chen recommended us to her cousin, who owned a small construction company. Bill Morrison told his suppliers about us. The Ramirez family sent their neighbors our way. By the end of our 2nd year, we had 37 clients. By the 3rd year, 52. We hired our first employee, a young woman named Sarah, who just graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University with a degree in accounting and dreams of helping people navigate the financial world. We moved to a larger office, added a conference room, bought real furniture instead of the folding tables and lawn chairs we'd started with. But the best part wasn't the growth or the success or even the financial security that was slowly building. The best part was waking up every morning and knowing that what I did mattered, and that I wasn't just another cog in someone else's machine, but a builder of dreams, a protector of families who'd risked everything to create something of their own. It was work that had meaning beyond the paycheck. So years after Harold Morrison passed me over for that promotion, McKenna Hennessy Financial Services had grown into one of the most respected small business accounting firms in Central Virginia. We had 83 clients, 4 full-time employees, and a reputation for treating people like family instead of account numbers. And David Richardson, the golden boy who'd stolen my promotion and my dreams, he lasted 18 months at Morrison & Associates before resigning amid whispers of client complaints and missed deadlines. Turns out that soft hands and family connections couldn't replace experience and dedication. The firm struggled for years after that, eventually merging with a larger company from Charlotte and losing most of its local character in the process. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because the real lesson of this story, the thing that changed not just my career, but my entire understanding of what success means, didn't come from watching David fail or seeing Harold's firm struggle. It came from a conversation I had with Mrs. Chen about 6 months after we'd started working together. I was reviewing her quarterly reports when she mentioned something that stopped me cold. Mr. Joe, she said in her careful English, before you, I was ready to close the restaurant. Too much stress, too much worry about the paperwork. I thought maybe I was not smart enough for business. She paused, smoothing her apron with hands that had spent decades preparing food for others. But you showed me I was not stupid. You showed me the rules, and now I understand. Now I can focus on cooking, on making people happy with food. And that is what I am good at." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You gave me back my dream." That's first when it hit me. If for 5 years at Morrison and Associates, I'd been chasing someone else's definition of success, with corner offices and impressive titles and the approval of people who saw me as expendable. But success, real success, wasn't about climbing someone else's ladder, and it was about building your own. It was about creating something that mattered, something that made a difference in people's lives. And it was about having the courage to bet on yourself when everyone else was betting against you. The promotion I didn't get, the devastating blow that I thought would destroy me, had actually been the greatest gift anyone could have given me, because it forced me to stop waiting for permission to live the life I wanted. It forced me to remember who I was before I started trying to be what someone else wanted me to be. But you know what the really beautiful part of this story is? The part that still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. It's not just about me. 10 years after we opened McKenna Hennessy Financial Services, we got a call from a young woman named Jennifer. She just graduated from business school and was looking for an entry-level position at an accounting firm. "I heard about your company from Professor Mitchell," she said during the interview. "He told me about a business plan one of his former students wrote, and how that student actually made it happen." Professor Mitchell, the same professor who'd encouraged my entrepreneurship class project all those years ago, he said you might be willing to give someone like me a chance, Jennifer continued. "Someone who's more interested in helping people than impressing partners." I hired her on the spot. Not because she had the best credentials or the most impressive resume, but because she reminded me of someone I used to know. A young man with big dreams and the naive belief that hard work and good intentions could change the world. Jennifer is now a partner in the firm, and she runs our small business division and has helped hundreds of entrepreneurs navigate the complex world of taxes and regulations and financial planning. She's never asked for a corner office or worried about impressing the partners, and she just shows up every day and helps people achieve their dreams. Just like someone once showed up for Mrs. Chen, for Bill Morrison, for the Ramirez family. Just like Tim showed up for me when I needed a second chance. That's the thing about rejection. He's my friends. About doors that slam in your face and dreams that seem to crumble before your eyes. Sometimes they're not endings at all. Sometimes they're beginnings dressed up as disasters. Sometimes they're the universe's way of saying, "You're thinking too small. You're aiming too low. You're worth more than you know." The promotion I didn't get taught me that success isn't about reaching the top of someone else's mountain. It's about having the courage to climb your own. But I want to tell you about one more thing. Something that happened just last month. As I was preparing to retire and hand over the reins of McKenna Hennessy to the amazing team we'd built over the years, I got an unexpected visitor. I was in my office, the corner office I'd eventually claimed, but this time on my own terms, when Sarah knocked on my door. "Joe, there's someone here to see you." Says it's personal. I looked up from the retirement papers I'd been reviewing to see a familiar face in my doorway. Ray Richardson, 25 years older, a little grayer around the edges, but still carrying himself with that same confident posture I remembered from our first meeting. "Hello, it's Joe," he said quietly. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same type of conversation I'd been having for decades, but this time from the other side. "What can I do for you, David?" He sat down carefully, like a man who'd learned that the world was more fragile than he'd once believed. "I wanted to apologize," he said simply, "and to ask for your help." The apology surprised me. The request for help surprised me even more. "I've been following your company's success over the years," he continued, "reading about your growth, your reputation, the way you've built something that really matters. And I've been thinking about how things went at Morrison and Associates." He paused, looking down at his hands. the same soft hands I'd noticed all those years ago, but marked now with age and experience. I was young and arrogant and completely oblivious to what I was taking from you. I thought success was something you inherited or claimed by right. I didn't understand that it had to be earned. We were all young ones, when I said carefully. But not all of us got handed opportunities we hadn't earned. Not all of us walked into someone else's life and took what they'd worked for. He looked up at me. I realize now how much that promotion meant to you, how much you'd sacrificed for it. I nodded. It hurt. I won't lie about that. I know, and I'm sorry, maestro. Not just for taking the position, but for how little I understood about what it meant, about what you'd given up to earn it. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside my window, I could see the bustling street below, filled with the kind of small businesses that form the backbone of our client base. You said you needed help with something, I prompted. David smiled ruefully. My son. He's 26, just graduated from business school, and he thinks the world owes him everything. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It did. He's been offered positions at several major firms, but I'm afraid he's going to make the same mistakes I did, with shortcuts. Rely on connections instead of building competence. I was wondering, he hesitated. Would you consider hiring him? Not as a favor to me, but as a chance for him to learn what real work looks like? I studied David's face, looking for any hint of the entitled young man I'd met all those years ago. But all I saw was a father worried about his son's character and a man who'd learned some hard lessons about the difference between privilege and achievement. Tell me about him, I said. He's smart, graduated summa cum laude from Wharton, good with numbers, understands financial theory better than I did at his age. But he's never failed at anything, never been told no, never had to prove himself to anyone who didn't already know his name. He shook his head. I'm afraid that if he takes one of these corporate positions, he'll spend his career thinking that success is about who you know instead of what you can do. I understood more than that. I respected it. It takes courage to acknowledge your own mistakes, and even more courage to try to keep your children from repeating them. I'll interview him, I said. But if I hire him, it'll be at the bottom. Entry level, no special treatment. He'll have to prove himself just like everyone else. That's all I ask. Started to stand, then paused. And there's something else I wanted to tell you. Something I probably should have said years ago. What's that? Harold was wrong, Doreen. You should have gotten that promotion. Everyone knew it, even me. Especially me. He met my eyes directly. You were the better man for the job. You would have been the better partner, and the firm would have been better off with your leadership. I felt something I hadn't expected. Not vindication, and exactly, but a kind of closure. Thank you for saying that. But honestly, I'm glad things worked out the way they did. Tilted his head, confused. If I'd gotten that promotion, I never would have learned what I was really capable of. I never would have built this. I gestured around the office, but I meant more than just the space. It meant the whole enterprise, the team, the lives we'd touched. I never would have discovered that the thing I was really meant to do wasn't working for someone else. It was working for myself. So understanding dawned in David's eyes. You're saying that not getting the promotion was actually the best thing that ever happened to me. Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually redirection. We shook hands, a different kind of handshake than the one we'd shared 25 years earlier. This one carried the weight of time and experience and mutual respect. But after David left, I sat alone in my office thinking about the strange ways life circles back on itself, how the worst day of my professional life had led to the best years, and how the door that slammed in my face had opened a window to possibilities I'd never imagined. And 3 weeks later, I interviewed David's son, Michael. He was everything his father had described: brilliant, accomplished, and completely untested by real adversity. But there was something else there too. a hunger that reminded me of myself at that age, a desire to prove himself that went beyond privilege and connections. I hired him as a junior associate with a starting salary that probably shocked him and responsibilities that definitely challenged him. Well, 6 months later, he was thriving. What because the work was easy? It wasn't. Not because he was given special treatment. He wasn't. But because for the first time in his life, he was being judged solely on his performance, his character, and his willingness to learn among. Just like someone had judged me all those years ago when I was desperate for a second chance. That's the beautiful thing about setbacks, about failures, about the moments when life doesn't go according to plan. They don't just change your direction, they change your perspective. They teach you that strength comes not from avoiding rejection, but from surviving it. That success isn't about getting what you think you want. It's about discovering what you actually need. And sometimes, what you need is the courage to stop asking for permission and start building the life you were meant to live. At my retirement party, I gave a speech to the team that had become my second family. Told them about the business plan I'd written in college, about the promotion I didn't get, about the choice between safety and risk that had led us all to that moment. But the thing I really wanted them to understand, the lesson that took me decades to learn, was this. Your value isn't determined by someone else's decision to recognize it. Your worth isn't measured by the titles they give you, or the positions they offer you, or the approval they withhold. Your success isn't defined by climbing their ladder. It's defined by having the courage to build your own. But the promotion I didn't get taught me that rejection isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a better one. Because sometimes the door that closes behind you isn't blocking your path. It's protecting you from settling for less than you deserve. Sometimes the dream that dies isn't the one you were meant to live. And sometimes the failure that breaks your heart is actually love in disguise, pushing you towards something greater than you ever imagined possible. Today, as I look back on 43 years in business, 25 of them building something I'm proud to call my own, I can honestly say that the worst day of my professional life led to the best years of my personal fulfillment. Not because the journey was easy, not because success came quickly or without sacrifice, but because I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to discover what you actually needed. You have to be rejected by someone else's dream to find the courage to pursue your own. You have to face the failure of Plan A to discover that Plan B was actually the plan all along. So as Chen closed her restaurant 5 years ago when she decided to retire, but before she did, she handed me a framed photo, a picture of her family gathered around the kitchen of the restaurant on opening day. Everyone smiling despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead. And on the back, she had written a note in her careful English. Thank you for helping me remember that dreams don't die. They just wait for us to be brave enough to try again. That photo sits on my desk at home now, next to the business plan I wrote in college and the letter from Tim that changed everything. And they're reminders that sometimes the most important word in the English language isn't yes. Sometimes it's no, because no forces you to look in new directions. No pushes you to dig deeper, work harder, think differently. No breaks your heart just enough to let the light in. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, no becomes the first word of a much better story. The promotion I didn't get wasn't the end of my ambitions, and it was the beginning of my understanding that the best promotions are the ones you give yourself, and the best success is the kind you build with your own hands, brick by brick, decision by decision, a day by day. The best life is the one you choose, not the one someone else chooses for you. So if you're sitting there tonight, nursing a rejection that feels like the end of the world, whether it's a job you didn't get, a dream that didn't pan out, or a door that slammed just when you thought it was opening, I want you to remember something. This isn't your ending. This is your redirection. This is life's way of saying you're ready for something bigger, something better, something more aligned with who you really are and what you're really capable of. The path you thought you were meant to walk might have been too small for your steps. The dream you thought you wanted might have been too narrow for your vision. The promotion you didn't get might have been protecting you from a life that would have made you comfortable but never fulfilled. Because here's what I've learned in 65 years of living and 43 years of working. Comfort is the enemy of greatness. Safety is the thief of adventure. And sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having someone else's small dream rejected so you can build your own big one. So be grateful for the doors that close, they're making room for better ones to open. Be thankful for the promotions you don't get. They're clearing the path for the ones you'll give yourself. And remember that every no you hear is just the universe asking you a question. Are you ready to bet on yourself? Are you willing to stop waiting for permission to live the life you want? Are you brave enough to turn rejection into redirection? If the answer is yes, if you're ready to stop being someone else's employee and start being your own boss, whether that's in business or just in the business of living authentically, then maybe that rejection you're nursing isn't a wound at all. Maybe it's a gift. Maybe it's the push you needed to discover what you're really made of. Maybe it's the beginning of the story you were always meant to write. The promotion I didn't get taught me that the best promotion is the one where you promote yourself, not to a new title, but to a new level of courage. Not to a corner office, but to the corner of your life where you finally stop settling for other people's dreams and start building your own. And you know what? That promotion is always available. You don't need anyone's permission to apply. You just need the wisdom to recognize that sometimes rejection is life's way of saying you're ready for something better. You deserve something more. You were made for something bigger. The promotion you don't get might just be the promotion that saves your life. So thank them for saying no. Then go out there and show them and yourself what yes really looks like. Because the best revenge against rejection isn't bitterness or anger or proving them wrong. The best revenge is living so fully, so authentically, so successfully on your own terms that you forget you ever needed their approval in the first place. That's the lesson of the promotion I didn't get. And it's a lesson that, even at 65, I'm still grateful to have learned, because it didn't just change my career, it changed my life. And if you let it, maybe it can change yours too. So here's to the promotions we don't get, the doors that close, and the dreams that die. Here's to the redirections that hurt so much we think they might kill us. Here's to the courage to build something new from the ashes of something old. And here's to the beautiful, terrifying, absolutely essential truth that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to discover what you actually need. Sometimes a rejection is redirection. Sometimes failure is freedom. And sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the first chapter of the best thing that ever could. Thank you for walking this journey with me tonight, friends, for listening to an old man's story and maybe finding a piece of your own truth in its telling. And if these words have touched something in you, if they've reminded you that you're stronger than your setbacks and bigger than your rejections, then maybe you'll join me for more stories like these. Because we all need reminders that we're not alone in this business of living, this work of becoming who we're meant to be. Until next time, remember, you are worthy of every dream you've ever dared to dream. You just might have to build the ladder yourself. So man, you know what? You're more than capable of the climb. Mahern yourselves and each other. And never, ever give up on the possibility that your best chapter is still waiting to be written.